Coming to you from the M&M Exterior Studio in Knoxville, Virginia, this is Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, the introvert's extrovert. She talks to people so you don't have to. For now.
Welcome back to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, the introvert's extrovert. I'm here with a two-time returning guest, woo woo, Christina Ammerman.
Yay!
Thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me again.
I'm excited to jump into another story. What is your story, Christina? Why are we here today? What do you think?
In the big picture, the medium picture, the small picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's so many. So remind everyone who you are in case they didn't hear your first episode.
Sure. I am Christina Ammerman. I'm a master spiritual healer. And it's not just something I do professionally. It's something that I live.
Yeah. I can attest to that.
Thank you.
You were just like working on healing me when we were just chit-chatting. So yeah, I can affirm that.
Yeah, and I always say I am my own best client. I'm the one that I scrutinize the most, and I'm the person I do the most healing on. It's like woven into pretty much every day of my life, because I'm always looking for how can I be even 10% happier than I am right now, 10% more productive, 10% less judgmental, always looking to grow and improve myself.
Yeah.
And working with mindset, with energy, with relationship to spirit, for me has been the key to achieving all of that in my life.
That's great. So for, I guess, layman's terms, so correct me, because I'm going to throw out some terms, and so you guide it just for people to understand. Would you say you're like a combination of a therapist, counselor, coach, healer?
Yeah.
So like a combination of, the coaching, the healing, the therapy, all that kind of stuff. Someone who kind of, almost like a holistic doctor, but like a holistic healer, coach person?
Yeah. All of that combined, and cheerleader, and, and role model, not in the sense of I've got everything so perfect, but in the sense of I show up totally authentic and transparent for my clients. And sometimes you see me going through my shit, and I show that to my clients when appropriate, because I think we all need to know that nobody's got it all figured out. And to see someone who doesn't have everything figured out, who can succeed and be happy, even, and to, flip-flop between, like, I can have bad days.
Yeah.
Or bad minutes that don't become bad days.
Ooh, that's good.
But yeah, so it's all of those things that you mentioned. I think I would say the clearest way that people sum it up when my clients talk to me about what I've done for them is they compare it to therapy.
Yeah.
But instead of going to therapy and talking things through week after week for months and months and months and years, it's like if you could sit down with a therapist, tell the therapist what your problem is, and your therapist could somehow reach into your mind and say, oh, okay, well, you're doing all that's going on because of this one wiring in your brain. So let's just pull that wiring out. And there's a way of working with your mind and your energy and just all of who you are that I've, dare I say, perfected over the 15 years I've been doing this.
Yeah.
So it's like we can hit the delete button instead of having to continue to struggle with things.
That's great. I wanted to dive more into that a little bit before we got into our conversation, because just so people can kind of have an understanding of, who you are, because who you are isn't just a profession or just personal. It's all mixed together. Yeah. So I was just thinking as you were talking that I was like, I don't know if you would put this on your business card, but it's like you help people figure their shit out. Like, is that accurate? Like if someone needs to figure their shit out, they can go talk to you?
Yeah. That's as good a description as any. It's not the tagline I'll use. But,
yeah. I don't think it's on brand for you, but but I just was thinking because I've had people ask me after listening, well, what do you do? And I was trying to think how to describe it. And so it's almost like people should just talk to you if they're on their journey. Just
Yeah.
if you're on your journey to getting to the next level, to healing, to leveling up, all the different things we talk about, you're someone in the card catalog that could be, let me sit down with you and see if you can be part of the team to help me figure my stuff out.
Exactly.
I say stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny that
feeling.
Sorry, I'm talking right over you.
It's okay.
I was just having this conversation yesterday, the same sort of idea with one of my clients who was basically saying, I want to refer you, but I don't know how. And what we figured out with she and I talking about it, she finally pinged on what got her to talk to me was a mutual acquaintance, someone else who back in June when they were talking, someone who had just decided to be my client was then talking to her, and their conversation was not about me. It was not about what I do. It was person number one saying to person number two, I've had all this stuff going on in my life, ways that I'm sabotaging myself, even things that I didn't even realize I was sabotaging myself. Like, because I work with a lot of women entrepreneurs who are very strong and very successful, but they'll have this goal they're trying to get to that it's like I think of the scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail where the knight is charging toward the castle but doesn't actually ever get any closer to the castle. And so, it's women who feel like they're doing that with their goals, that they're running and running and constantly moving, but they're not getting any closer. And it turns out that there's all these subconscious things that are going on that are causing them to kind of be running lateral to the goal instead of toward the goal, because we all have something within us that doesn't want us to succeed, where success is very scary. It's the unknown. It's like as dangerous as walking down a dark alley. And so my experience and my expertise is in understanding what's going on in the subconscious mind. So when you were talking about that tagline with figuring your shit out, it's a little bit off, because it's more like, this feels arrogant when I say it out loud, but it's like, I've got your shit figured out for you already. Ooh. Because I understand what's going on in the deepest part of the subconscious mind that's common to all of us. So when we sit down, you tell me, okay, you've got this going on in the surface of your life, and I'm able to match that up with, okay, well, that's pattern XYZ. So, and that's a root cause thing. So when we heal that root cause, it's not only going to fix what you're talking to me about today, it's going to fix, business stuff, relationship stuff, physical health. Those tend to be the three big things that people notice changing in their life when we've been working together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm excited because we're going to talk about you today.
Okay. We got to come back to me. Yeah.
Because with everything you just said, I was like, okay, let's explore all my issues. Let's go. Let's do this. So I'm going to put a timeout on that. Although I'm not going to lie, I might work it in later because take advantage of our time together.
It's your podcast.
Woohoo. But no, I want to talk. So last time you were here, we didn't know exactly what we were going to talk about. We kind of talked about some faith stuff, which I enjoyed. But I've been watching you over the last 6 months and seeing your journey and your journey of joy.
Sounds like a stalker.
I'm watching you.
You need to get Jeremy a soundboard with sound effects, so he can throw in evil laughs or something like that. Yeah. So you've been watching me.
I've been watching you and seeing your journey of joy. I noticed, like you just said, what were the changes you noticed when someone heals? It's physical.
Business, personal relationships, and physical health.
Yes. And so I feel like I'm seeing those changes in areas of those lives. I'm seeing changes in those areas of your life. And so it goes back to what's your story? Like, what is going on with that? Let's dive into that, because I know you've been through a process. And if you are willing to share, your story helps enlighten people for their own story, in my opinion. So What is the deal with that? Can we talk about that?
We definitely can talk about it. My hesitation is never, do I want to talk about it? Because I love talking about myself. It's always the where to begin.
Yeah.
You know, do I tell the story linearly from the beginning, which honestly is childhood?
Yeah.
Or, you know, do I do it the way?
Well, then trust me, I will lead it then.
Okay.
Girl, that's what I'm here for.
Awesome.
Okay, so what sparked the most recent shift in your life?
Oh, that's an excellent place to start.
Thank you.
Good job. High
Thank
five.
you for affirming me. I appreciate that.
What really sparked it, this like out loud public focus on joy, was actually, it came from a week where I was definitely not in joy. Because I have weeks like that, and I've learned to think of them as like the slingshot pulling back, you know. So I've learned to honor them and really go into those down phases, knowing that something good is going to come out of it.
Yeah.
And so it was a week where I didn't want to do anything other than sit on the couch. So not work on my business, not go out networking. But I have brought myself up to a rudimentary level, a minimum level of discipline that says, okay, you can be on the couch, but pay attention to what you watch. Like, this is not the time to watch Law and Order. And I think we talked about Law and Order on my last episode.
Yes.
I'm not watching that anymore. Family Guy still sneaks in. And what I had actually done is I had canceled Hulu. I had canceled Netflix. The only streaming service I had was Amazon, because I don't have cable. I haven't used cable.
We don't have cable either, but you canceled Netflix and Hulu.
So all I had was Amazon and YouTube. And so that week I ended up on YouTube, reconnecting with videos from a teacher that I had discovered 5 years ago, watched one of his videos, said, I love his stuff, and never watched his stuff again because it actually was so good. It took me to a place I wasn't ready for 5 years ago.
Yes.
But go ahead.
So hopefully this makes the last podcast and this makes sense but like our guest that we just recorded with said and I wish I had it written down, the places we need to find stuff is the places we don't want to go. I don't know. He said it much more eloquently, but like,
yeah.
Turn on my mic. He said it was Latin, a phrase in Latin that he couldn't remember the Latin for it, but it was you basically you find the gold in the cistern, which basically means you're going to find what you want, not where you want to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you seek is where you don't want to go, or something like that.
Yeah. And the cistern that's a well. It's a dark, gross well, that you have to like go deep down into, and who wants to go down in there? So I love that. I love that phrase.
Yeah. So hopefully we should find like the Latin phrase. But anyway, I digress. I just like you hear those messages multiple times. You're like, oh yeah. Got to dig into those places. So you were not watching this teacher.
Yeah.
So you rediscovered?
I rediscovered him, and I totally see, the hand of God or the law of attraction or whatever, whatever your point of reference is at work when, like, I said, okay, well, let me see what's on YouTube for me to watch. And for no particular reason, one of his videos was there as a recommendation. And that turned into a 3 or 4 day binge watch of this teacher whose name is Matt Kahn.
Okay.
Matt Kahn, his motto is all for love. And of the many awesome videos, it was like then I was catching up on 5 years of stuff that I had been avoiding. One of his videos are all recordings of these talks that he gives that are 90 minutes to 2 hours long. And one of them, he talked about knowing what your primary intention is in life. And he gave his own example that he's all about love. He is here to bring love into the world and to help people find love within themselves. And so that naturally inspired me to ask, well, what's my primary intention? Yes. And I tried on love. I tried the idea of love. I'm like, that doesn't quite fit. It feels too like soft and squishy and that's not, that's just not me. I'm more, I don't know, I'm more vibrant or something.
Joyful.
Yeah, well, and then the word...
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. And then the word joy popped in my head, as if a message from spirit. And I'm like, well, let me try that on. And it not only immediately felt good, but I realized I suddenly had this flash through my mind of all of the different ways I had already been focused on that message without realizing it, like including my bio on Facebook for a long time said joyful being, deliberate creator. Like that's how I described myself, as a joyful being. But it never occurred to me that that's
like your mission or your purpose.
Yeah. So and then the other reason that made sense is because I understand the universe through the law of polarity. So there's this whole set of universal laws that, when we study them, help us understand the order to how life works. And the law of polarity says that when something exists, its opposite also exists at the very same time, in the very same space. Like, you don't need to go out looking for it. It's right there, and to the same degree. And of the many ways I've learned to apply that law, one example is that pain and joy are opposites. And when I look back at my life and how much pain had been a part of my early years, it made total sense that all of that would have been the setup for me experiencing joy in the second half of my life. And not even half. I mean, I plan to live to 150, so like the second 3/4 of my life.
Nice.
Yeah.
I want two things. I want to go back just for you to repeat, because of course, as you were working through your own stuff, my brain's like, I'm engaged with you, but then I'm like, this makes sense. I'm all about connection. I need to keep leaning into this. So thank you. Thank you for my free therapy.
Sure.
So what was the question you asked? Because I want to just have listeners ask themselves that question that you were processing. I ended up processing. It was, what's your
primary intention in life?
Yes. What's your primary intention in life?
Yeah.
That's a great question that I think everybody, and that goes back to what I've been leaning into with the podcast now, is like, what's your story?
Yeah.
And then because I've been thinking, what's your story? That could go in any direction. What's your hobby? Why are you passionate about what you're passionate about? And what is your primary intention? It's a great other way to say it. So
yeah, and another way people ask the same question is, what's my purpose?
Yeah.
And there's a tendency to think of that in terms of practicality and linear, like
job success.
Yes, is it my purpose to be a podcast host or a coach or a teacher? And really, what this question, asking it as what is my primary intention in life, shows us that there are all of those things are vehicles, any of which we can choose to put forth that primary intention, which I think with I've kind of tested this question with my clients and asked them, what's your primary intention? And so far, everybody has distilled it down to, there is some emotional experience that they are here to have for themselves and help facilitate for other
share
people.
With others, yeah.
So connection is at the heart an emotional experience. For one of my clients, it was freedom. That's an emotional experience.
Do you think it's something, you talked about your childhood with pain and now experiencing joy, and I wanted to lean into that a little bit more. And based on what you just said, I was also having some brainstorms of like, if it's an emotion we're seeking, once we find it, we want to share that with others.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of like with direct sales or something, it could be any sales. Like I'm just using that as an example where it's like, you get excited because you're like, oh, I've been searching for this. I found the solution. Now I want to share it with others, and that's in a sales world. But it's like with all this primary intention stuff, same thing. Like you're searching for it, you figured it out. And so that's the thing you then want to pass on and get others on board and join you in that feeling.
Yeah. And the good thing about finding finding one's primary intention is the sharing of it is very natural.
Yes.
As opposed, in contrast to your direct sales example, sometimes that's very natural.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
natural.
Forced.
Yeah, that came to mind because when it is like a natural fit. Let's lean in real quick to the polarity. Were you saying that the pain, because of that, the opposite of joy, and so through your healing, you came on the other side and it's joy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I had already been on the healing journey for so long. So this moment of, having that inner conversation inspired by Matt Kahn, the awareness that my thing was joy is what came up first. And then as I was thinking about it and looking for confirmation, hey, is this my thing? What I also knew as a healer is that joy and pain are opposites. And, so the pain that I'm talking about is, I think I'm still learning how to find the words for this that don't sound blameful.
Okay.
But simply put, my mother was abusive, emotionally, verbally, physically, when I was a child. And, it probably started out as like spanking, but teenagers shouldn't be spanked. Like there's whatever the cutoff was where it's appropriate, we went a decade beyond that.
Yeah.
So not only, it's interesting even now that there's sort of more dots connecting as we're talking about this, about pain, and pain and joy, because not only was that a painful experience for me to be hit, until I'm like cowering in the corner of the dining room. But what just clicked for me is I was experiencing that because my mother was in pain. And certainly I've come to understand as an adult that, she was battling her own demons, but that specific connect the dots of she was experiencing pain. And so that is the only thing she could bring it's the only thing she could offer anyone else.
Yeah.
Like calling her thing pain is a totally new moment in my mind right now. Yeah. I've called it everything else. I've called it her demons. I've called it her struggles, but I've never acknowledged it as her pain.
Because she had her own wounds.
Yeah. This is, it's not something my mother and I ever talked about. But I knew my grandmother. It's easy to imagine that this has been something generational that has been passed down from woman to woman in my family for who knows how long. And I'm honestly grateful to be have the ability to stop it.
Yes.
To end the cycle.
That.
So,
and that's true in so many families. And that's why I really appreciate you opening up about that, because when someone acknowledges their pain, you have a decision. Do you lean into it or do you pull away? And it's sometimes hard to know. And I think that because you've done so much work, that's the blessing you can give to other people, is starting to peel back those layers and to show that joy can come after pain.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes you see happy people, joyful people, and you think, oh, they have an experience. They're happy, joyful because of not having something. And then when you're able to kind of know people's truer story, the parts that we at least are willing to share, I think it gives hope to other people, and hopefully to do the healing too. That, it's a combination of making a decision, but it's also a lot of work that you've done through the process. Yeah.
And some of it has been very intentional, and some of it has been almost by accident. Like there's light bulbs going off in my mind as we're sitting here talking, like realizing that before I had that week where I'd sat and watched all those Matt Kahn videos, it was somewhere, I don't know, maybe in the month before that, I was starting to feel like I needed to tell my story. And one of the things I had to work through was being public about my story and how that was going to reflect on my mother.
Yes.
Because I don't feel good about being out there saying, my mother abused me. I don't.
Yeah. Is she still here?
She's still living.
Do you have a relationship with her, or?
sort of. I think as it's awkward. She's in Connecticut. She's still the rest of my family still lives in Connecticut. I'm the one who moved down to Virginia because I didn't feel any bond with my family that inspired me to stay close to them. And the opportunities after college were down here. Yeah. So we've in the 20 whatever years I've lived down here, we've gone through all sorts of phases of our relationship. And this year, I realized I hadn't talked to my mother since Mother's Day. I had called her on Mother's Day, and then we didn't talk all summer. We didn't talk most of the fall. And meanwhile, I was going through this internal process of feeling pulled to tell my story, but how do I do this? It was actually not so much it wasn't just my mother I was worried about. It was, I have a younger sister who is much closer to my parents, kind of the opposite. Like, she moved one town away, and she still spends a lot of time with my family. And something I had posted on Facebook, my sister had responded to, not on Facebook, but at like a family gathering when I saw her, that something, whatever she said indicated to me she's paying a lot of attention and not going to respond well if I start talking about my mom in a bad way, in anything that might be construed as a bad light on Facebook. So I had to work through that. And one of the things I actually ended up doing was unfriending my sister and my brother-in-law and all of my family members on Facebook, because I was that tapped into, this is important for me to do, meaning telling my story, putting my message out there. We don't interact on Facebook anyway. So like, I was waiting to find, like, when I go home for Christmas, it'll actually be my first time talking to my sister, and we'll see if she even notices I unfriended her.
Yeah.
Like, that's how disconnected we were.
Yeah.
But I knew I needed to do that. So just to get that worry out of my head, so that I wouldn't feel the need to censor myself and hold back pieces of my story as I started talking about it.
Wow.
So far there's been no backlash to unfriending anybody, as far as I know. But we're like, the whole family dynamic is like, we're not talkers anyway. We're not closely connected. It's part of that whole story, I think.
So how are you feeling about, we're not just in my, studio, just you and me chit-chatting. We're technically recording it. This doesn't have to be included, but how do you feel about it? Because we are technically recording right now.
Yeah, well, and I thought about that light bulb went off a moment before I started talking about it, and frankly, I'm fine with it. And if I need to, I could I could rationalize it as, well, my mom will never hear this. Yeah, my sister will never hear this, and yet, I also at the same time, like, I want success for your podcast.
No,
I want to see the...
No, I don't. I was about to say, I do not want broken relationships or, like, with the podcast. Like, I was thinking as you were talking, that's why I'm finding... So my thing is connection. And so it's like, that's why I phrased it, what are you... I should have said able to share, not even willing, because that maybe almost sounded like a challenge. Like, how deep
I do tend to respond to things like that.
Shoot, I didn't know that. I should have said, how much are you able to share? Because as much as I'm about connection, I'm also a big believer in boundaries. And so I think that you leaning into sharing your story is super important, and I'm all for it.
There's a piece of it that to be aware of that, if you and I are talking, I can only lean into your pain as much as I've leaned into my own pain.
Oh, someone just said something, maybe it was you, about that. We can only... sorry, I was trying to think who I was talking to. Yes, you can only... Yeah, sorry, say that again, because it's really good.
I can only lean into your pain as much as I've leaned into my own pain.
That's good. Yes.
Yeah. And so something for all of us to be aware of is... There's a lot of people walking around with their own experience of pain, and we don't need to compare each other's and say, well, you got abused, but your thing is just that you don't like how your hair looks or whatever. Like, we've all got our stuff that we're trying to sort through, or for some people, not trying to sort through. Like what you and I have in common is we shine spotlights on the stuff that feels dark and try to bring light within ourselves to that darkness.
Yes.
And there are so many people who, for whatever reason, don't have the skills, the ability, the willingness. They don't feel safe to do that. And so with the Just Ask campaign and with the general idea of empathy, I think it's okay to acknowledge that it's a learning process, and if someone simply isn't capable of doing that because they have their own need for healing, like
oh, you're so kind and good. Thank you for clarifying this so beautifully. Keep going. You stopped.
I don't.
You interrupted.
I know, but she stopped talking. I was encouraging her because I wanted her to keep going.
So I think we need, rather than making sure, like, for those of us who know how to have compassion, we need to apply that compassion to the people who don't have compassion. Yeah.
It's so true. I know. I'm like, I have compassion for people. Unless you don't have compassion, then screw you. Then I don't like it. No, I'm just kidding, though. But no, I'm glad you said it like that because, yes, I don't want it to come across like pointing fingers. It's more just realizing that difference. But then I like how you pointed out that it's okay to have that difference. Because, of course, if we all walked around the exact same, that would also be not good.
Yeah. And I really wanted to emphasize that for the sake of someone who might be listening right now.
Of course.
And...
Well, especially because most people listening, I say I'm the introvert's extrovert. I talk to people so you don't have to, because if they either can't have the conversation because they don't want to, or they feel like they can't, for whatever reasons. So I like your empathy. I'd like to cut actually everything out that I said and just focus on your good words. Let me go through an editing process on that.
Your words were good too. Because everything builds. I mean, we're in this conversation together, and so you have a thought and you share it, and I have a thought that builds on that. And so if we cut yours out and just isolate what I said, then what I said doesn't make sense. It doesn't have context.
Yeah, but then I can censor myself and just only present, like social media, the good parts of me.
Well, that doesn't sound like flushing it out.
Dang it! Why do you have to call me out on stuff?
Because I know that you'll be with me on this.
I am with you, and that's what I want. Okay, so getting back to your journey to joy. Joy exists because of the polarity with pain. You figured that out. You are leaning into joy now. You figured out that was your primary intention.
Yeah.
How are you currently walking that out?
First and foremost within myself.
And is that just constantly getting back to, is this sparking joy?
Yeah, it's like I'm Marie Kondoing my life.
Yes.
And there's some things I did earlier this year that were part of that before I even had this conscious awareness that my intention is joy. You and some of your audience members know, I had a business called Zenquility. And technically, I still have the business called Zenquility. It's the name of my LLC. But it was a brick and mortar business.
Yeah.
And it had been a brick and mortar business in a public space since 2013. Earlier this year, I decided to close it. And what led to that decision was a moment of clarity that basically boils down to, I'm not enjoying this anymore. And because I'm not enjoying it, instead, it's a burden. It's dragging my whole life down. It was, it was interesting to see too the correlation between like not having the joy in my business and not having the revenue. Like the practical matters of business were being affected because the joy wasn't there. And so as soon as I made that decision of like, my joy is important to me. And if I'm not having fun, then I don't want to be doing this. As soon as I made that decision, so many things started falling into place. And actually, this is the story that I use to help really help people see the practical power of joy, the spiritual power and the practical power of joy. Because this law of polarity that says pain and joy are there in the same moment really shows up in this story. Because it took me about a week of that decision to close the business came at the end of a week that started with another episode of me just wanting to be on the couch because I was so burdened by my business and burdened by life at that moment. And this was earlier in the year, so I hadn't rediscovered Matt Kahn yet. What I was listening to that week, I was watching YouTube videos of Abraham. Esther Hicks channels this consciousness that calls itself Abraham, talking all about the law of attraction, talking about the power of emotion and how the better you feel, the better your life is going to be. So I spent a full day in my pajamas just binge watching Abraham videos, which those videos have a double effect because just listening to them helps me feel better. And then what I am learning from them reminds me that feeling better, feeling good is actually important. And so that week I spent really focused on, I'm going to feel good no matter what. I'm going to make this my number one priority. I'm going to cut out of my life, anything that doesn't make me feel good. And that Friday is when I really had that come to Jesus moment of, you know what, my business is not sparking joy, and what do I do about that? And I had the idea, maybe I need to actually look at closing the business. And so one step of that would be reaching out to my landlord to ask, can I get out of the lease? And looking back on that, the opportunity to talk to my landlord was there all the time. There was never any physical block that, it was not that I didn't know his phone number, his email address. I could have done that at any time, but I didn't see that possibility. The thought couldn't enter my mind until I got into that place of already feeling joyful and wanting to maintain that state of joy. So the possibilities that we're able to recognize become more positive and more fruitful when we focus first on feeling good.
It sounds a little cliche. It could sound a little cliche, but what I'm thinking of as you're talking is it's kind of that whole filling your cup. You can't pour from an empty cup, and needing to focus on filling your cup. And so I would say you're filling your cup. It's joy. You're being intentional about filling your cup with joy.
Yes.
And then when you realize it's not full, you realize the empty places and kind of cutting those out.
Exactly. And cliches are cliches for a reason.
For a reason, exactly. That's why I use them.
So, and of course, making that decision to close the business had a lot of moving parts, other people who were going to be affected, that I needed to sort of check in with them. Not so much to get their permission to make the decision, but just to know what's going to be the consequence if I make this decision, and is it a consequence that I'm willing to accept? And so I did move forward with getting out of the lease. This was back in March. It was mid-March when this came up. We were out by the end of March. So then the first week of April, I was officially working from home, and I enrolled multiple clients in that first week of April because I was just in that place where I was tuned into opportunity and hearing and being clearly receiving guidance from spirit, or, other people might say being clear on what God wanted for me. And just I was in the zone because I had lifted all that weight off of me. And so that is my story of, yes, joy actually makes a difference. And that was a big difference. I mean, it was a revenue making difference.
That was on paper, black and white. You can see the difference. That's great. And where now? Where are you going now with joy? So that was kind of those were kind of some of the beginnings. What's next with joy and for life? What can we take away from what's next?
Well, now I'm on that mission to help other people experience this for themselves. So I created a Facebook group called Joy Uprising, and that's open to everyone. And we just did a Facebook challenge, my first one ever, and from my perspective, it was a success.
Yeah.
In terms of it was the most consistent engagement on Facebook that I've literally ever done.
Awesome.
And so, and as you might know, I called it the 50 Shades of Joy Challenge because I like to be playful with words.
Yes.
And actually what happened is I was in my kitchen maybe a week before the challenge started, and the phrase 50 Shades of Joy popped in my head. And I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. What can I do? Like, what is this a title for? I need to create something so I can give it this title. And doing it as a Facebook challenge is what came up. So the challenge is done, but all of the videos and interactions are still in the group, and there will be more that I do in that group to create a joy revolution in the world.
So what are some things people can do? You're pumping us up. We want to have joy. What are some things we can go do to spark joy in our life besides decluttering our house?
That is part of it.
Marie Kondoing our life. So how can we spark joy? What are some things?
The number one thing is recognizing and acknowledging the importance of it, and acknowledging your power to be in command of how you feel. There's so much of our world is set up to make us depend on external things to create the joy for us or give us the permission to have joy. Mm-hmm. And so step one is really giving yourself permission to say, feeling good is important to me. Mm. And that comes from, it helps if you take in my story as an example of, okay, it actually makes a difference. Like, I'm not doing this just as the airy, fairy, rainbow and unicorn sort of thing, but because I believe, or at least I'm considering the possibility that it could actually change my life. So I want to give it a try and see what happens when I do it. So step one is that mental flipping the switch. And then step two is consciously building things into your life that spark joy for you. Like, for me, my number one thing is music. I've got multiple playlists on my phone based on, there's one for when I'm already feeling good and I want to stay there. And there's another one for when I'm feeling kind of meh and I need to, get inspired. Yeah. And I've even got songs that are my go-to, because sometimes we can't get to the joy that easily. Sometimes we've got the pain.
I was going to say we have to sit in the pain, right?
Yeah,
you have to feel it.
And so I've got my my songs mostly like 90s grunge music, Stone Temple Pilots.
Oh, that's Jeremy's favorite.
Fist pump from Jeremy. That I go to when there's pain in there that I think I was thinking about this the other day. I think my process is I use music to amplify the pain so that I can be more aware of what's going on so that then I can work with it, and I kind of talk to my pain. Like, what do you have to tell me? Like, what is this about?
Exactly. Yeah. What is this about? Well, I enjoyed this very much. Thank you so much for sharing, and I'm going to resist working out my own shit today, so... I
think you did a very good job of restraining yourself. Yeah. I applaud you.
We have an after show, so... but thank you so much for coming back, sharing your journey of joy, sharing not only the joy, but the pain that goes with the joy. And I think that people can better understand not only your journey of joy, but their journey to joy through your story. So thank you.
You are so welcome, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks.
And that's a wrap for now.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle. Music provided by twinmusicom.org. Song titled Night at the Dance Hall. Sound editing by me, Jeremy Spittle. A special thanks to our studio sponsor, M&M Exteriors. Visit their website at mmexteriors.com for all of your roofing, siding, and gutter needs in the Northern Virginia area. Visit our website at flushingitout.com and be sure to subscribe. This has been a Spitfire production.
That was the greatest thing I've ever heard.
Don't forget to check out the after show on the Full Flush bonus episode where Samantha and I continue the conversation with our guest. You can find the Full Flush episode right here on Flushing It Out every Friday.